the situation was like everything outside looked amazing, fundraising, business growth, revenue, etc. Even unit economics were like getting there. There was a path that you could believe. In my heart of hearts, like I didn't quite feel like we had enough control of the business's core. I didn't quite feel like we were making the progress of being technology. I didn't quite feel like we were building something that like every customer was mind blown of. And I was very much like, we're going to get there. And then
Yeah.
in the thing that I started spending a bunch of okay, so that was the sort of landscape, but it was fine because we were growing our way past that. We were growing so quickly that I wasn't even worried.
Hey everyone, Zach Roseman here, host of The Hard Pivot. I'm thrilled here to be today with Yaakov Zar, founder of Lev and exited founder of Dispatch. I'll talk more about that. Yaakov's a good friend. We've known each other for, I don't know, probably close to 10 years at this point. And has a fascinating story, which I'm excited for him to share today. So I just did a quick intro, but Yaakov, I don't know if you want to give a little bit of background on you, or we could jump straight in, whatever feels right to you.
Thanks for having me, Zach. Yeah, I think you hit the main points, which is my whole identity is tied to my career so far. No, yeah, I grew up on Long Island, and then I went to Boston University, and then I started a company called Dispatch with a co-founder, Avi Goldberg, who I learned a tremendous amount from, and then we sold that business to Vista Equity Partners in 2018. I stayed there for a bit, and then in 2019 I started Lev, and that's what I'm still up to.
Awesome, awesome. Yaakov is being modest also. He has two beautiful children. We were just talking
I have
about it
two
before we
amazing daughters, and
record.
they are perfect.
So it's not just work, work, work for him, despite all of that he's achieved and yet to achieve so far. So, okay, so we have a bit of your background. Before we get into Lev and the pivot story there, can you just tell us, how did you get into startups? How did you get into what caused you to start Dispatch? What was like the story in a nutshell there? Maybe we'll spend some
Sure.
time on it, or maybe we won't, depending on how interesting it is. But yeah,
Yeah, my I think about it sometimes because like I was kind of like a pretty geeky kid in middle school and high school. I was like reading tech blogs, and I realized to
what
go
what
back
years
that
are
like
what years is that? What year? Like, give me
it's
the.
like 2005 ish,
Okay,
2005, which like
yeah.
reading back now, it's like
Right, that
right
was like
after the dot-com
TechCrunch was
bubble.
like just starting, right? Like that was
Yeah,
like Michael
yeah,
Arrington in his heyday.
and like I vaguely remember like blog posts of Andreessen Horowitz starting a fund, and I like didn't quite know what a venture capital fund was, and I didn't know who these two people were, but like there were all these blog
You were
posts.
like,
So I,
that's too many letters for a fund.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I was exactly. So I was so I throughout like middle school, high school, I was like making computers and making websites and like random tech stuff. And in high school, I tried to start a couple of like local food delivery businesses in my town and whatever I could. Grocery delivery I thought was exciting. So I remember going to like the local kosher grocery store and trying to. The guy took me into the like basement where all the operations of the grocery store happens, and I was trying to pitch him on doing like a Instacart effectively for kosher grocery
Yeah.
in Great Neck, and yeah, it was one of those things. I was a high school kid, so it didn't get very far. But that was always my life. And then in college,
By the way,
I
it's
needed
like
money.
it's like
Yeah,
the amazing aspect of being naive. It's just like you don't
hundred
know what you
percent,
don't know, so you just go in and pitch, and you're just like.
100%.
Sometimes it's amazing because you're uncovering things, and sometimes people are just like, "Oh, kid, I've been down this path before. Let me tell you."
100%. And also, it was before like the Social Network movie where like everyone decided that they could be a startup entrepreneur, and like
Right,
the
and
grocery guy thought I
before.
was like a genius, and I'm like, no,
Right,
dude, like I know how to make
Well,
commerce
and it was,
sites.
oh, you're going in that direction. There was another thing I was going to say. It was before the financial crisis when everyone couldn't get jobs in finance and consulting anymore. So they're like, I might as well go to tech,
Yes,
where big
yes, for
tech
sure.
became like a sexy place to work.
But yes, but more so it was before like everyone thought that they were going to be a startup entrepreneur.
Right,
And
right.
I was learning a lot that then, and I'm really grateful that first of all my parents like encouraged me and didn't think I was like a complete nerd. And my uncle, like I remember I would go
No,
talk
they
to him about
probably
like
did, but it was
random stuff.
okay.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
wanted
Yeah, they're like,
to
here's this little weird
nurture
kid
it.
we made. Yeah, exactly. So I ended up with all these like computer skills and knowledge of I was never like a hardcore software engineer, but like I'd make websites for people and they'd pay me. I'd like build a computer for somebody and they'd pay me, and I was sort of like learning on the job. And thank God I grew up in a community and family, etc., where people were able to support me in those things, and I was able to have downtime and learn those things and have access to computers, etc. And in school also it was less so because like that was like pretty nerdy at the school classes of computer, so I was like
Yeah.
kind of trying to be part of it, but like trying not to. So yeah, that's when I learned a lot.
Wait, so you embraced your nerdiness, but you didn't want to be as nerdy as the other
You don't
nerdy
want to be
kids in the class?
identified with the yeah. But like I was secretly like best friends with all of them.
By
Yeah,
the way, you're talking to a kid, a guy who, as a kid, was like reading every like Star Wars like novel, like Star Wars
yeah,
franchise novel, and playing like
yeah.
Ultima Online, and yeah,
Yeah. I remember when Twitter came out like I want to say 2007 or something. And I wasn't like the first person, but I was pretty early on Twitter. And I remember going to my uncle and being like, "Yo, this is so cool. Like it's like a thing you send a text. It was all by SMS mainly. And you'd like
yeah.
subscribe to people's SMS." And he I remember him looking at me like I'm out of my mind, like what's the point of this? But I also remember thinking it was pretty cool and like yeah, so that was the time. And then in college,
Okay,
I sort of took that into college with like, you need money in college to do college things. So I used it to, I was making websites for people and various things of that nature to to make some money. And also, I mean, that's when I learned a lot. I also learned a lot from my dad when I'd help him out with work stuff and help him with sending emails, etc. So that sort of like all culminated in college where also my professors were very supportive of me. I studied business at BU, and in my concentration was entrepreneurship. And I remember specifically my professors, at least the ones that I like talked to about what I was doing, were very supportive of what I was doing. I think it was important looking back that they understood that the sort of entrepreneurial lessons I was learning in between classes of like making a website and negotiating a contract with somebody and doing a proposal, etc. And I remember like being in class, like working on a proposal to make a website for someone for $800 or something, and not paying attention to the class as much. But that was a big part of learning entrepreneurship in my mind also, and that was hugely
so
effective. And also
you
I met
think
people that ultimately led to Dispatch. Yeah.
that you think the classes were as helpful as you actually like doing it yourself, or like was it because you were in this context of college where you could take classes where you could like actually be building something on the side and learning how to be a better business person? Is that
I don't think that I learned. I college was really important. I think everyone agrees that like the experience of college is important. I think there's very little in there's like terms here and there about like finance a little bit or like marketing terms randomly that like I vaguely remember touching on them in college classes, but like you learn that way more outside of college. I'm very
yeah?
happy I went. I definitely did not learn what I'm doing right now through college.
Got it. Okay. So you're how did what you did in
Do you think
college
you learned
making
what you're doing
websites?
right now in college?
No. I loved my classes. I was an econ major, and it was mostly calculus.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the calculus, and as much as someone can enjoy calculus, maybe some people really do. Like it was fine. I wasn't the best at it. I wasn't the worst at it, but I loved some of the more content-driven classes. Like I was my last year of college was started in September 2008, and the world fell apart in the first 2 weeks of September. So like
Yep.
Lehman Brothers was sold over this, or collapsed, and then Merrill Lynch was sold that
Hmm.
same weekend. And so our econ professor and one of our upper level econ classes like literally took the curriculum packet in front of the class,
Threw
and
it
she
out.
like literally threw it across the room, and she's like, we're going to talk about the Fed and quantitative easing and
Yeah.
open market, the open market purchases and a whole bunch of different stuff because the world is falling apart. And so that was pretty
Yeah.
awesome. But like I remember like specific things like that, but I don't think anything that I learned I look back on today and say, oh wow, like that was really critical to my career. Maybe it was how to ask questions, how to learn, but it's hard to like draw the straight line from one to the other.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I think it's interesting because it goes to what we're going to talk about on pivoting, but like there's for the example you just gave of like Lehman Brothers shutting down over a weekend and your professor throwing the textbook out, like that's just a classic. No one knows what the hell's going on in the world. Like
Yeah.
no one would have ever been able to assume that, and there's no amount of textbooks that you could read that will teach you and prepare you for that. And I think it's very much the same in running a business, and that's what makes this the question of your company's strategy and like the pivot decision, etc., so insane because there is no playbook. So we have a
Right.
podcast like this, and like hopefully it'll inspire people and give them some things to think about. But like
Or
and
scare
maybe
them
this is a
away,
good opener.
which it could
Yeah,
do.
for sure. And maybe it's a good opener, but like it's just a big guess. I mean, like, I hope my
Oh
investors
yeah,
don't,
every week you walk in and
it's
something
totally a
new
guess. And I
changes.
think yes, 100%. And everyone knows that. Like, you never have complete information. There's no exact thing that you could look at. No one ever was in the same situation as you. No one has the feel for what's going on in the business that you have. So like, you're, it's a big set of guesses.
100%. I want to get to that for sure, and I'm
Yeah,
excited.
sure.
I see your passion when
Yeah,
we
yeah,
talk about it. So
yeah.
so you're doing this stuff in college. Tell me just briefly, like, what was the idea for Dispatch, how to get started, and then
So
how did you
yeah,
actually execute on it?
so in college, I started in college. I was like, I went into college. I was like making websites here and there, and like making a couple $100 a month doing things. And then I eventually started like getting a pattern of like working for specific types of nonprofits. And it was also when Facebook apps and Facebook pages were first happening. This was like 2009, 2010. So I would help small businesses and nonprofits create Facebook pages. And I was like, we'll make your website and we can make your Facebook page. And then I made a Facebook page template and was making, I remember I was selling it for $500. And and then I sort of stumbled upon doing there's like a couple of businesses that every entrepreneur in college gives the shot to. Textbook trading, 100% of the time. Food delivery, which now I assume is not happening anymore because it's ubiquitous. Um, and then finding an apartment. And I was like, I had tried all of them, and I ended up with the finding an apartment one. And I met
Okay.
this guy, and I'm like, we'll make a. I started off with like, it was a consulting thing where I helped this guy who was in real estate make some social media presence to rent out his apartments to college students. And then we decided like, let's make this into a bigger thing. And I was like, all into tech and venture, etc. I didn't really know how it worked, but I was like aware of it. So we ended up like working on it, and we did this launch over winter break, and I was super excited. And my plan was that I was going to graduate college that spring and run this company full time and raise venture capital. So I started having like some venture investor meetings. I didn't really know how those worked either. I remember I went
You're
into a
like
meeting
22
with
at this point.
I was like 20. I was like 20. I was a little early in my college. Yeah, I was like young for my grade, and I graduated college early. So, um, I remember I was like, I had a meeting with Founder Collective, and I never had a job. I knew very little about money. I mean, I knew
Investor in
like
my company,
working
by
with.
the way.
Oh, nice. Yeah, they
Yeah.
rejected me. So, the the
Don't worry, I think you did pretty well.
yeah, I remember I went into a meeting with them, and I pitched them on this company. It was called Social Rent at the time, and they're like, "Well, let's go talk about it. We're going to talk about it for a second." And I thought it was like Shark Tank. Like this was like a year into Shark Tank, and I'm like, "Okay, they're going to come back with like a check or something." I don't know. Like, I'm like, "I need
That's awesome.
$1 million." I remember showing them some model, and I'm like, "Are they coming out with a check?" And I have to like sign a paper. I don't know. So
By the way, later tell me which partner it was, because then I want to send them
jeez,
an email after to be like, by the way,
yeah,
this is a
yeah,
hilarious story.
yeah. So it was really funny. So yeah, they didn't come back with a check. They told me they weren't. So yes. So where was I going with that? The
So
so
you were
that
saying
company
that,
wasn't working out. Yeah. So
right?
I met through that. I was introduced to Avi Goldberg, who was running another company at the time and sort of had a fund. And I thought that he was making like venture investments. He wasn't really making venture investments in that way. But I went and I met with him, pitched him everything. He was trying to be helpful and like saw a young entrepreneur that he's just a very nice guy and wants to be helpful to people. So, and a very successful entrepreneur himself. So he was like trying to figure out how to help me, and he's like, "Why are you trying to do this?" And I'm like, "I'm graduating college and I want a job." He's like, "Look, if this doesn't work out, let me know and we could find something else." And he like also in that meeting, very respectfully, and I do this to entrepreneurs all the time, like he ripped my business into pieces. Like he just told like trying to be helpful.
Well,
And I
that's what you
remember I
want.
left. Yes, yes, for sure, for sure. Well, yes, you don't know you want it until
Well,
you do.
you don't know you want
Well,
it, right?
yeah. Because the next bit of the story is I remember I left his office and I went to the Cambridge, to the bus stop in I forgot what it's called, something square outside MIT, Kendall Square, and this was where their office was. And I remember I sat at the bus stop and I was just crying. I just sat down and cried. I'm like, my hopes and dreams are gone. That was really really sad.
Can I ask? This
Um,
is a sort of tangential question.
sure.
How many VCs had you bet with by that point? before he stood there and
5.
gave you.
Tiny.
Okay, fine. So it's
Tiny
not
amount.
huge,
Not even.
but okay, fine.
If
So it
that.
was
If that.
relatively early in the journey where he just gave you like, here's the what to what. Like you need to
Yes,
be aware.
that was the thing that the thing that like really hurt was I thought that we were like totally onto something amazing, and he ripped apart. And I had a lot of hope in that meeting, which was just on no basis, and he ripped that apart and just like opened my eyes to what things should be again, like in a
Okay.
very nice way. But that it was I didn't know what I was doing, so I was just kind of like alone. The standard, like I
Yeah.
was alone. I didn't know who to look to for guidance on that, etc.
Yeah.
So I was very sad. I was very deflated by that meeting.
Yeah. Okay. So how do you go from there then to
Yeah.
starting something with him?
So then I graduated college. Didn't have a job. I didn't have any money. I went back home, and then I hit him up because he'd said like if this doesn't work out, let me know. So I reached back out to him, and he's like, I'd moved back to Great Neck on Long Island where my family is, and he was in Boston. So I reached back out to him, and I'm like, look, I'm working on this is done. Like I'm looking to do something. He's like, okay, come in. Let's talk about it. So I take the $20 bus back to Boston for the day,
The
and I go to his
4 hour
office.
bus
Yeah, I go
each
back to
way.
his office. I go back to his office, and I sit in his office, and there's like a bunch of people there that he like started companies with, and etc. And they sort of like put this thing in front of me for dispatch, which was Uber for home services. Like you press the button, you get a plumber, electrician, appliance repair company.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I didn't really have a job. I'm like, great. So he's like, we like negotiated. He's like, we'll pay you $1,400 a month or $1,200 a month, I think, for the first month, like to plan this out. So I'm like, great. I go back home on the bus. I start like wireframing the whole thing. I built like a full prototype of this app, which was sick, of like the technician app and the customer app. And I go back like a week or two later, and I present it to them, and they're just like mind blown because I just did I kicked ass on that prototype.
Yeah.
And also Avi probably didn't really I don't think up front he realized that it was just a prototype. He thought I like built the whole thing. So then so whatever. But we clarified that, and but it was still very impressive. And I'm like, look, like this is what we're trying to build. Great that we assigned a couple of outsourced engineers to build this with us, and we were up and running. And at first, like I got a raise to $1,600 a month, so I could move to Boston and like move back to Boston. I was living on my friend's couch for a bit, and like my friend made me pay rent, so I will never forgive him for
Some
that.
friend.
So yeah, exactly. So
If only he had
that
taken
was how
equity
Dispatch got
instead of
started.
cash.
Yeah. So that's how Dispatch started. So Dispatch got ramped up, and then eventually Avi, like we spent like a couple of months. I was building like the first version. Eventually, Avi came full time as CEO, and we realized. I mean, that was another pivot story that I didn't even realize coming into this. Like that business pivoted pretty significantly. Also, we started off trying to build a
Tell us.
marketplace. Yeah, we started off trying to build a marketplace to get our plumbing.
Kind of like, so just to like put people's heads around it, like an Angie's List kind of marketplace, is that
Yes.
okay?
Yes, it's like yes, TaskRabbit, Angie's List is sort of like getting
Handy,
there.
yeah,
Yes, exactly. So we Handy was starting right around that time in Boston also, and TaskRabbit was starting also actually in Boston around that time, and we or a little bit earlier, and we were going like a little bit more for professional services like plumbers, like licensed electricians, appliance repair, etc. So the
versus like
premise.
TaskRabbit, which is more like TV installation,
Yeah,
shelf
exactly.
installation. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. So we were like, great. We decided let's start off with a app for the customer and for the technician. Pretty straightforward. We built that out. We started trying to get technicians. Very quickly we realized for these types of technicians, they have like a team. They're like a company in the office, etc. So
yeah, it's like a plumbing firm with 20 plumbers or something.
or five or four or three,
Right.
but it's definitely not one guy who's in charge of his own schedule.
Yeah,
So we said let's build. So we realized we needed to build software for the dispatcher. So we built like this whole
oh, and
scheduling.
did you even realize that there was a dispatcher before you started it? Like that
No,
concept existed? I got it.
no.
You're
Yeah,
like,
it's
everyone's an
ridiculous.
independent plumber, and
I don't know what we were thinking. I don't know what was going on. I don't know. Yes, but yes, it was not well thought
well,
out.
now I want to dig it. Now I'm interested because this is a pivot
Sure.
too. But when the idea, like, how did Avi come up with the idea and
Avi
like
came up with it because he was frustrated with like all these
with his
random
own
things that were
experience?
broken. Yeah, which was great, and like and very quickly we spoke to his HVAC guy, and we spoke to his like appliance guy, and the guy that fixes fitness equipment repair guy, and we had a bunch of conversations initially, and then like it was pretty quick that we realized we needed like a whole dispatcher tool. So
Right.
then our strategy became, let's build this dispatcher tool, give this like SaaS workforce management product to which, by the way, this was also the same time as Service Titan was
I
starting.
was
Service
about
Titan
to
started like
say,
a year or two
yeah.
before, and obviously they did a much
When I was at
better job
IAC,
of
I think
this.
we acquired Angie acquired a business called M Help Desk that I
M
think
Help
did
Desk, yeah,
something
yeah, exactly.
something
Yes, they
similar.
did the same thing. We were competing with M
Yeah.
Help Desk, all those guys, exactly.
Yeah.
And we were talking. We actually worked. We did a lot of work with Service Magic back in the day before they
Well, that
became Home
was just
Advisor.
for everyone's knowledge. That was the old name of IAC's business, Home Advisor, which then
Yeah,
went from Service Magic
acquired.
to rebranded Home Advisor because IAC had owned TripAdvisor back in the day, and they thought Advisor,
Oh,
and then
oh,
IAC merged Angie's List and Home Advisor into and what was now called Angie.
and
That's
Handy,
5 6 years
and
ago.
Handy.
And Handy, they had acquired Handy. Anyways,
Yeah,
it's a whole bunch of
yeah,
different things. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And M Help Desk, right? So all those things got thrown into one bucket, and we were
But that was
talking
much
as
later. That was later. At this point,
it
you're
was.
competing against M Help Desk and early
Yes,
Service Titan. Yeah.
yes, and Job. There's a company called Jobber, and like a couple of other
Oh
small
right.
ones, and we had built. So our
Wait.
product
So
was like
just to be clear on the pivot, this pivot was you thought you were going to be building a consumer tool, that a consumer marketplace. People are going to come and request services, and it ended up being different. That you ended up building a tool for service providers to manage their own inbound source of leads, or
to
just your
manage their
leads.
schedules and dispatching. No, to run their whole scheduling and dispatching, so that we
Oh,
knew the availability, so we could book appointments for the consumer into the slot. That was the
got
premise
it.
at
Okay,
that
so
point.
it's interesting. It's a little bit
That
like
wasn't a
ZocDoc
significant
too.
pivot. It was more, yes, that was more of a strategic. It was more we OpenTable, like OpenTable did that exact thing. Like you manage all your
Right.
reservations, and we open up
You
the books
needed you
availability.
needed the scheduling software in order for you to know when the openings were and book the
Yes,
openings, right?
exactly.
Okay, got it.
But that still doesn't fix all the other problems of a marketplace for services, which is
For
like
sure.
diagnostic, understanding what the pricing is, etc. So
By the
and
way,
then
and
we
what you're
realized,
talking about, just again, I'm just going
yeah,
back to my IAC
yeah,
days.
sure,
This is where Angie, well, the newly named Angie, like fell like 2 years ago. As they had this notion that they could pre-price everything by market, and it failed pretty spectacularly, and they're still dealing with that fallout. Anyways, go ahead.
yes, yeah, and so then we started. We What did we do? Oh, and then we're like, okay, we were trying to we got like a handful of these service providers onto our dispatching tools and our mobile app. We still like the consumer stuff we were demoing, but it was still on the side. We weren't actually like doing anything. We weren't actually going to market with it yet.
So you
But we
had this
did.
like
We did.
product that you had built first that actually you were
Yep.
like it was sort of sitting there not doing anything because the more important thing that you needed, the blocker
Get the
was the
supply.
right. Yeah, okay.
You got to supply the marketplace, and part of that product was also like your customer will get a text message when you're on the way, and they'll be able to track you, and all those other parts of the experience, which were really cool.
But at
And
the
it was
time, that was novel, and now you have like
totally, yeah, it's
Apple has
yeah, exactly,
built specific things for Uber on the screen where you can
yeah,
see where the
yeah,
Uber is. Yeah,
insane, yeah, exactly.
yeah,
And we we decided we were having a bunch of conversations trying to our goal basically became like get service providers on board. So we tried a bunch of different things, like let's get let's do like online lead gen of like these SaaS tools that we're doing all this keyword stuff for like the long tail of keywords to acquire service providers, and like we had a outbound sales, couple of people doing outbound sales to acquire service providers, and we tested different pricing for them, and then we also through some of Avi's network started having a bunch of conversations with like large national brands about like who were either like franchise brands who had like Mr. Appliance has like a bunch of franchises nationwide, or their corporate run. And they had similar. This was a time where they didn't yet have mobile tools for their service providers. They definitely did not have any customer experience type tools. They had like a internal like Microsoft Dynamics implementation, or like maybe Salesforce, or probably something older and more
one
legacy.
step removed from MS DOS.
Yes, exactly. And our pitch to them was like, well, so then we thought like, wow, that's great. So what we could actually do is we get a bunch of these national providers on, and then we have all of the supply nationally, and then we can flip our consumer app open.
Yeah,
So we went deep in these enterprise conversations. Enterprises loved the mobile extension for their internal systems, meaning their technicians could get jobs in real time and update the status, etc., instead of printing out the work orders for the day. And then two, they loved that the customer had this experience of tracking the technician, et cetera, et cetera. They love that. So we had a lot of success with enterprise. We had a lot of interest from enterprises to buy that software, and we sort of went with it, and it was great. But like, it totally did not enable the marketplace at all. Like, they were not at all interested in us starting to book jobs or build our consumer brand on top of theirs.
Oh,
They were
they
like,
viewed it purely as a SaaS tool for internal
yes,
use.
internal, yes. So we sort of like went with it, and that was a kind of unconscious pivot. And there's a question of like, at the time, was that the right decision or not, or whatever. But it worked out really well, and we were able to. I mean, there's a lot more after that, but we were able to basically take that premise and build a pretty good business that we eventually sold to Vista.
Okay, so you said something just now, an unconscious pivot. Was it really unconscious? Like, did you remember thinking, okay, I guess we're not working on the consumer app anymore, or was there there was never a conversation? I know this is a long time ago, but where
Oh,
you and
there
Avi
were a
sort of
lot of
sat down.
conversation. There were it was me, Avi, and a bunch of other people, and we probably had too many people in the room and too many opinions and lack of like intense strategy. And also we were like trying to figure it out, and there was money here, and we didn't think as much about there's in Lev today also, like, I think a lot about like, what is our current business and where are you trying to get to? And I think every startup has that. And like, you can get stuck in your current business without the next step. And I think at Dispatch, one of our mistakes was we got like, in order to win some early customers, we got like really stuck in the current business, which turned out to be great. It was great. It wasn't, whatever. It wasn't Service Titan quite, and it wasn't quite Angie, but like, it was a great business.
What do you think? What decision do you think made prevented? I guess the wrong word, but let's use that because I'm can't think of a better one right
Yeah.
now. You from being the service titan, which just went public at, I don't know, $10 billion value, some crazy valuation. Like what was it that they did? What decision did they make early on? Was it not working with big enterprises and working with more independents? Was it something
They did
else?
a much better job of building a software that was absolutely critical to SMEs and then working their way up market. And they
Into the
focused
enterprise.
on like a pretty they focused on like HVAC that was high dollar, and a lot more. They built a lot more robust systems to helping those businesses make more money, whereas we were thinking about like scheduling. They were thinking like, let me show a proposal. The HVAC business is all about upselling the guy when you're in the guy's house,
Yeah.
so like, or in the person's house. So they built, I'm very much simplifying it, but like, they were much more focused on helping them do that and win more deals and maximize revenue than what we were doing, which was like, make sure that this appointment to fix the guy's treadmill was like at the right time slot, which
Yeah,
didn't
it's
matter that
interesting. They
much.
were like revenue optimization, revenue growth, I guess,
Yes.
and you were like time optimization or consumer satisfaction optimization. And
Yeah, which
it's
just
a
doesn't
lot
matter as much.
easier, right? It's like, well, it matters, but it's a lot harder to value, probably, right? It's
Yes,
like for the
100%.
for the business. For when you go to them, if you're service side, you go to them and say, hey, on average, our HVAC techs see a 25% uplift in upsells. Okay, well, that's
Yeah,
worth $300 a month, and that therefore I can charge
yeah,
X percent of that as a margin
exactly.
on the product.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. Okay, but still, you built a great business on the enterprise side and ended up selling it to,
Yes.
which what at the time, and I think still is one of the largest, most successful private equity firms in the country, Vista.
Yes, we were in their small fund. They have like a small fund, and yeah, we were raising our Series B, and we came across them, and Avi ran that process, but it was great, and the business is still running. They did another acquisition. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so now, wow, what a nice detour. I love that story of the pivot because usually it's actually the first conversation I've had with someone who's like realized in the moment that there's a pivot, but also B, that's like it was like an unconscious pivot, right? Like, I wonder if there's a lot of those
We
that
were
people
sort of
don't
just
even
like
realize.
following the market, right? Like, you're just sort of following what your customers say. And I think
Right.
every pivot, the title of the podcast is Hard Pivot, and I don't think every pivot is that intense necessarily. Like,
Right.
we in Lev, we made a much more significant shift, but like, kind of also at the time, I don't know if we realized how much of a shift that was either. I think
Right.
sometimes it's not as obvious.
Right. Well, so
It's not as dramatic. It's not as
the
dramatic.
name. By the way, the name is more sort of like double entendre. It's not
Right.
necessarily. It can be like a 90-degree pivot, but also can be like
Right.
it's hard because it's hard to make a decision to change
100%.
directions, right?
100%.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's easy because you see it's not working, right? Like in my case, even though it was
Yeah.
hard, I can see it wasn't working with Draftboard, the original version. But I wanted to say something else about your pivot, and I can't remember right now. Okay, so you sell the company, you stay on at Dispatch for a little while longer, and then you get to like 2019. Is that roughly when?
Yeah. So the order of events is we I was living in Boston. I'd started the company in Boston after graduating, coming back to be with Avi, and then we in 2018 we sold it to Vista, but a little bit before that, a year before that, in 2017, my wife and I found out about this first time home buyer program, which is you could buy a house with 5% down, and we're like,
Yeah,
that's sick. Like everyone says you should own your house. I don't know, whatever. I didn't know much about real estate at the time. I still don't. But so we're like, great, 5% down. I didn't have 5%, but I borrowed 10 grand from my in-laws and 10 grand from my parents, and we found this apartment for 500K, and it was sick, and we were like super excited, and we're 2 weeks away from closing, and I'm like. My income from like the past couple of years, which was like very unreliable, it was like you were making like
yeah. We heard 1,600
$12,000.
a
Yeah,
month.
exactly. And then like all of a sudden, I think I was at like 100 grand at the time, and like they try to average it, and it's just like funky, and so I was like totally on top of. They're like, "Why is your income like
The bank, you're saying, for the
whatever?"
mortgage.
Yeah, yeah, yes, the mortgage
Yeah,
company,
yeah,
yes. So I was like on top of it, like on top of it. Like when you're trying to fundraise, like you're not letting shit like slip through. I
yeah,
was like trying to get this mortgage.
yeah.
And I was calling the guy every day, and I was definitely, you know, not making his life easy. So we were 2 weeks from closing, and the guy calls me, and he's like, "Sorry, there's some issue with the building, and like the FHA isn't going to approve the mortgage." And I flipped out. I'm like, "Dude, like I've been on your ass." I was so pissed. He's like,
Yeah.
"It happened to be." He's like, "I know some other guy that will do whatever," and we got another mortgage in a different structure that ended up being fine. But I was like, at the time, I was like so frustrated. I was frustrated with the process already. I was frustrated with like all the back and forth and me not knowing what's going on and having to ask all these questions. And I was talking to Avi about it, and he'd also just bought a house, and we're like, it should be like base camp, like you just log in and like it tells you exactly what your tasks are, which was what we were using for project management at the time. And like, so we're like, we should build this. So I thought let's build sort of like a residential mortgage company that's technology powered. And I
Like
actually took
literally
classes.
issuing loans.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know. I was like, are we going to be the software provider? Are we going to be the mortgage company? I decided the best way is to actually be the mortgage company. I took classes. I became a licensed mortgage loan originator in Massachusetts, and I was
Wow.
like ready to. I like met with some guy, and I'm like, yo, like, let me join your mortgage company, and like I'm going to build all this software, and we're going to make it better. And I spent a bunch of time doing that, and then like really quickly, just the bandwidth. I didn't have the bandwidth, and whatever, my frustration subsided, and
Wait,
dispatch was
I want
gone.
I want to pause you for a second.
Yeah,
Before you
this was
started
pre-Vista.
this,
Yeah.
right? So you're still working on Dispatch, but you have this other
Yes.
idea.
I was on dispatch full time. I was
Yeah,
like totally committed to dispatch. We were
yeah.
still like a scrappy trying to figure it out, but I was like so pissed off and think that
Because
dispatch was like
because in
kind of
your
stable.
personal life you were dealing with this other shit, and
Yes.
you're like, well, now I was spending time dealing with this shit before. The time I was spent dealing with it, now I can think about what's the solution to it.
Yes, and also like the starting company has like some ups and downs, and like I was at a point where like dispatch was relatively stable,
Right.
and I was like, I don't need to be there anymore, but like I could spend a little bit of energy trying to figure this thing out.
Yep.
So I did that. I spent a bunch of time trying to figure it out. Real dispatch got just crazy again. We were selling like crazy. The enterprise strategy, I was like doing a lot of sales. It was very productive, and I just put it on the back burner for a bit. And then my wife and I decided let's move to New York a little bit after that.
That's when
To
we met. So that's
where
like
when we
six,
met.
7
Yeah,
years ago. Yeah.
this was in 2000, early 2018.
Yeah.
We're like, let's move to New York, and we moved downtown, and we helped Rabbi Korn at the Chabad house, and the Chabad house's mortgage was coming due. They
Oh
had
yeah.
bought it some period before that, I guess. Whatever, I don't remember
For
exactly.
those who aren't familiar, Chabad House is like a synagogue.
Yeah, for students in
Yeah.
downtown. Yeah, primarily for students and young professionals in downtown. And so they have like a commercial condo in the city. They bought it with a $3 million mortgage. The mortgage was coming due. In commercial mortgages, an important just aside, and I assume your audience doesn't know a lot about commercial mortgages, but the
I certainly don't.
yeah, so commercial mortgages are usually not self-amortizing. So when you buy a house, you get a 30-year mortgage that amortizes over 30 years. So at the end of 30 years, you don't owe anything. When you
Right.
buy a
Every
commercial
month you're paying
mortgage,
back a little bit of the principal in addition
yes,
to the interest.
exactly. With the calculation that at the end of that period it'll be zero.
Yep.
Commercial mortgages, usually the amortization and the term of the loan are different. So you might have a 5-year loan with 15-year amortization. So at the end of 5 years, you still owe a ton of money. You may have, which you basically need to refinance or sell the building, and that's just common in commercial. There are some
Yeah.
self-amortizing, but it's a very small portion of the market.
Also in corporate loans, like I remember when I was in investment banking, there was like the term loan A, which was more like a consumer mortgage where you pay it off over the course of the loan, and the term loan B was like you pay off 1% of the principal over the 5-year lifeline of the loan, and then you
Right.
have to
Exactly.
either pay back or refinance the 99%.
Exactly. That's how commercial mortgages are. And we were so there was the mortgage was coming due, and I'm like I knew about mortgages, and I was helping the Chavadahs with some of their business stuff, and I called up, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I knew like a little bit about residential mortgages from my experience. So, and we had just sold Dispatch to Vista, and I was helping out with this mortgage, and I called one of my buddies to get the mortgage, and we went through the whole process, and he walked me through it. And basically, he's at one of the big shops, and we first he's like it's going to be really hard to get a mortgage for a synagogue. And I'm like, yeah, that's sure, that makes sense. He's like, well, I have a strategy. Like first I'm gonna I have data to figure out all the synagogues, like who the lender is on all the synagogues. So I'm gonna like get the list of lenders that have ever lent on a synagogue or a church before, and then we're gonna put together the marketing material. So we put together like an offering memorandum to the lender, which is basically like a pitch deck of why they should lend on the building. So he's like, send me pictures and tell me the numbers of students that come, et cetera, and the financials. And we put together all this material, and I'm just like in my head, I'm like, well, do you have software for this? Like he sends me like a PowerPoint deck. He's like, and so then I'm like, this is just crazy. This is just like silly. This is big. And at the time, I was thinking about what to do next, and I was like excited about. I was looking at companies like StreetEasy and Via and a couple of other companies that had like really built something big in just New York City. Like they had built like the New York City market's pretty big, and they like specialized and built something just right there. I also was looking at real estate in
But it's
general because I
seamless
was
too. Seamless Grubhub. Like
seamless. Yeah, exactly.
until I don't know a few years ago, like 60% of their business was New York City.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought like that's interesting, and then I was also thinking about real estate a bunch because I don't know why I was just interested in real estate with my whole mortgage experience, and it's a big market.
By the way,
So I
so
was
that,
like,
so just to take a pause here, you had been exploring something in the personal real mortgage area because of your own experience, and at this point, you had kind of like put that to the side, or it was like you had decided it wasn't worth, or you just didn't have time to work on it, and now it started to like creep back in, but from a commercial perspective, or are they two sort of
well,
separate paths?
they were separate paths, but like at the time, I was at Dispatch for a bit after selling Vista. Excuse me, I was at Dispatch for a bit after selling, and sort of like felt like my time there was going to run out at some point.
Yep.
So I
Yeah.
was like kind of thinking about what's next. I was think I still had the mortgage thing from back in the day in the back of my mind. I was thinking about something to do with New York City specifically because I thought that was an interesting approach. Like you could just win in a pretty decent market without worrying about everything in the world. I was thinking about um, real estate, residential mortgages, commercial mortgages, and I was having this commercial mortgage experience. So this commercial mortgage experience was just like beating my head on top of
Got it.
all the other considerations I had. And I'm like, this should be fixed. So I started having a bunch of conversations about this, particularly of commercial mortgages. And I'm like, this should be Rocket Mortgage. Like you put in a property address and you get a quote, which just sounds beautiful, is really not the way commercial real estate works for a bunch of reasons. So I decided, and then also like I had, like when you run a company, you have like all the lessons that you think like, well, next time the grass is always greener.
But that's what I wanted to get to. So you sell Dispatch, and then I want to like understand. Okay, you're starting a second company. Like, what are the things you look back and that you look back and said, I don't want to do this. I do want to do this. Like, what did you learn from
I'm
the
like,
first time?
I don't want to build software to sell it to other people, which was like a stupid thing to.
Mm.
There was no like basis for it. I was just like pissed off because we were doing it for a long time. Like I don't want to integrate into other systems. I'm like, we'll just be. I don't need to spend 2 years building a product that we could then sell. Like we could start today, and I could start generating revenue. My premise was, let's start off as a tech-enabled brokerage, as a if meaning like we'd be the sorry, I missed the point. The world of commercial real estate finance that I described, of like getting those 5-year mortgages or whatever, is currently run by brokers. So you go to
And by
like
the way,
some
you're
guy that,
just to be clear to everyone, you're not talking about just financing mortgages for synagogues and churches. You sort of see a much larger opportunity for all
yeah,
kinds of
yeah, for
commercial
sure.
real estate.
Yes,
Yeah.
all real any real estate that is not a 1 to 4 family house falls into a bucket of commercial real estate. So large apartment buildings is multifamily. Like everything there falls into the world of commercial real
Retail, like
estate.
strip malls, like
Retail,
does
office,
office fall
industrial.
into that? Okay, got
Yes,
it.
yep, industrial.
Okay,
Literally any real estate that's not a 1 to 4 family house.
okay, got it.
Um, schools, like anything. The
Yep.
so we so I was like, I thought that world is dominated by brokers. You go to some guy who works at like a company like JLL or CBRE or something, or a bunch of smaller ones, and they know all the banks just because like they know them. I don't know why we think they know them, but they do. And you tell them the deal, and they will like call their 4 guys and get you a quote. It's like any brokerage business. Like it's super legacy, happens by email, about relationships, who takes you golfing, that's how you
Black
remember,
box,
go to,
opaque.
but
Yeah.
totally, yep. And the guy gets paid 1% of the loan amount. Sometimes some deals are super hard and like they really, really deserve it. Some deals they made 2 phone calls, hand you off, and like whatever. So I thought the best way to digitize this is to be the way to build a marketplace. Like what we want to do is build a marketplace. A brokerage is a marketplace where the human is in the middle and like making all the decisions. So my premise was, to build a marketplace, we to build a digital marketplace, we should start off with a human powered marketplace and build our own technology, and eventually you'll replace you'll have the broker in the middle, like doing all the work. You'll have our technology helping the broker be super powered. The broker
Right.
is basically onboarding your customers onto your marketplace through doing deals for them. Your broker is basically onboarding the lenders through bringing deals to them. So we'd have the broker both be a stopgap in the sort of lack of maturity of the technology in the meantime, and be the sort of onboarding vessel of a tech-enabled
And
brokerage.
it's a familiar to the players in the marketplace. It's a real
Totally,
person. You
totally,
don't have to educate
exactly.
them to some newfangled thing.
100%, exactly. And you're eventually going to build enough technology and sort of like Trojan horse your way into getting everyone to use it, and then be fully digital. That was the
Yep.
premise.
Okay.
So, and also I was excited because I'm like, we could just start generating revenue on day one, which we did. We started doing deals right
Right.
away. Like I put up a website, we built like a super basic CRM, we put some lender data together, and like we started doing deals. We literally like
I remember you
running
would announce
transactions for
them
family friends.
on LinkedIn like every week, a new deal,
Yep.
this, that, 10 million, 1
Yep.
million, 3 million.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And in 2019 we did $100 million of loans, which was great. We made like $700,000 of revenue in the first like 8 months of a company, which is like insane.
Right.
So that
Did you
plus,
did you get any pushback from your early investors who were like, yeah, it's 700,000, but it's like it's service revenue.
yeah, if it was SaaS revenue and we had $700,000 in our first month, we would have been like $1 billion company very quickly.
Right.
It was
But maybe
definitely
you didn't
known,
get.
but
Well, I guess you
we
didn't
didn't
get
get
pushback because you told them this is how we're going to build
yeah,
it,
yeah,
right?
for sure. We
Yeah.
didn't get the discount that you would get if you were running a brokerage, which like maybe you could argue that you should have. But like we had a
Right.
really good. I have a deep tech background. I've experience selling a software company. I have building and selling a software company. I'm like pretty product and software oriented. We had a very good strategy and story of like what we were trying to build in a big market. So yeah, investors like the growth was impressive. Everyone understood like this is transaction revenue that's like still human powered, but we were having traction. So we raised a pre-seed for $2 million, and then we spent and then COVID happened. It was just mayhem, and we thought we were going to shut down the business, etc. But like, and then it came back very strong, and we were going very, very quickly. We raised a seed from amazing investors, and everyone was aligned. Like I said, like it's a big market. We were having traction. We were breaking into the sort of like boys club of brokers. We were doing real deals. We had good revenue. Like it seemed great. That was our business. So we started.
Okay.
Yeah, it seemed great. Everything was great.
Dun dun dun. This is the time in like a TV show to be like, we'll be right back.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so things are going great. The team's growing. You're doing 100 million plus in your first 8 months. COVID
We
happens.
definitely had like an existential crisis during COVID, which it's just not relevant to the pivot. But like I thought we were going to shut down the company.
Yeah.
but we came back roaring,
Right.
and it worked. It was going well.
Yeah. Part of me wants to hear that. Whatever. Essentially, it
The
sounds
short
like
is
it.
just we just thought
Yeah.
that there was no deal. We had like a pipeline, and then there was no deals, and
Right.
it all
Everything was
disappeared, and like
frozen. The whole
everything
world
was
was
frozen
frozen.
completely for like 8 weeks, and we just thought like the company was done. And I was thinking about like going into hibernation mode and firing everyone.
Yeah.
We had just hired a bunch of people. We raised $2 million, hired a bunch of people. We were like getting ready to ramp up, and then volume froze, and we were just scared.
Yeah. Okay. So fine. So there's probably a whole other podcast for about
Yeah,
founders, like what happened during
We
COVID,
came,
right? But
we came back from that very, very strong, and
and
we
you
were,
sort of like pick up where you left off.
very much more, even more. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
we were growing very, very
Okay,
quickly.
Yaakov. So back from the break, you were just talking about. I think you were about to tell us where things started to feel like
Yeah.
they weren't going as well as they had been.
There's two things happening in parallel right now. Okay, so
Okay.
we
By the way, give me the timeline. Where are
yeah,
we right? Like what
this is
time?
2021. No,
Okay.
so we had a bunch of every company. We were about to die twice. We were about to die when we had just raised $2 million from Animo Ventures. Shout out to Nico and Tono and the team at Animo.
Also investors of mine.
They backed me. They backed us very, very early, and they've stuck by my side like insane. Really shout out to them. Um, and then so they just put in $2 million. This was like September 2019. We didn't have much. We were we COVID hit, existential crisis, like nothing's gonna happen. Should we shut down? Should preserve our money? Came back. We like ended up having a very successful 2020, starting in like after COVID chilled out, and then end of 2020 we were running out of money again, and we literally had like a month of payroll or something, or 2 weeks of
Wow.
payroll, and I think I'm pretty sure I spotted the company. Like I definitely stopped taking money for a bit, and then I think I lent money to the company, which was crazy, until
Hmm.
NFX came back in. And it came in and led our seed. Officially we called it a seed, and they also Pete Flint is um both an unbelievable investor and mentor and partner and friend, and overall amazing. The
Wow.
business, so once that happened, we had made a hire that was really significant for the brokerage story. Our business was rocking. We were just like we did $1 billion in 2020, which was insane. We were on track to do
Wait,
like one
can
point.
I ask
Yeah,
why? Because I think everyone's going to be wondering
yeah.
why were you 2 weeks away from not being able to hit payroll if everything
Because
was going so
it
well?
was COVID. No, because it was COVID, and we were I was slow to have a bunch of fundraising discussions, and
Mm,
stupid. It was still COVID. Like investors were still not aggressive during COVID at that time, and there was still
yeah,
uncertainty. So even though our volume was going up, like I was trying to raise a bigger round and was having a bunch of conversations. I was probably a little late to having those conversations. Our burn ended up being a little bit more than it should have, and we were just like way tighter than I would have liked to be.
got it. Okay.
Um, and then then when we raised our seed, we had a bunch of money in the bank again, and we had made this like hire on the brokerage side, which was good. So we were
By the
like
way, so that means you did 100 million in your first 8 months of the company in 2019, and then
of loans, yeah,
pretty much in the second half of 2020, because the first half was dead, you did a billion.
yeah, yeah.
Wow.
It was crazy. Um, so it was insane. Which is a big part of the conflicting story in my head, which I'm going to tell you. Like we were growing a lot in terms of volume. We were doing very well from a fundraising standpoint, which I like to attribute to my good looks and charm.
That beard, man, that beard.
And yeah, it was zero interest rate. It had nothing to do with zero interest rates. And we ended up with customers loved. We were doing a lot of deals for customers. Customers were very happy. Like everything was going swimmingly. In my heart of hearts, I knew that there was like that the unit economics were not where we wanted it to be. And in the heart of hearts, I knew that we weren't building something that was like absolutely differentiator for our customers. Like I knew from my pride, kind of like from my confidence. I was wavering in my confidence because like I would look at the numbers and I felt like there were a lot of assumptions of things that had to go right for this business to make sense. Like there were a bunch of things about our efficiency per person and retaining customers and acquiring new customers, a lot of things that had to go right. And we sort of were like really aggressively excited in that we were trying to build a a bunch of technology that would make that happen, additional businesses. We started lending businesses because the premise was like vertical integration. The lenders are making more money on the loans that we originate.
Right.
We'll
Can
be
you
able to
capture
make
that?
more per transaction, which would significantly help our unit economics, which was great in theory. And like there's still a strategy, a path in which that strategy would have worked. But I was still sensing like our product was not blowing people away because the experience that customers had if they went to a broker that was established and didn't have any of our technology or went to us was not 10 times better. Like we will.
So you said earlier they were thrilled with your product. So they were thrilled. Like I guess you're saying, relative to another broker, they were thrilled. But it's not like it was just step change in interaction that all of a sudden they were like
Correct.
open their
And our
eyes to a
customers
no
were
way.
happy, and they were definitely happy, but it wasn't like I probably take back. Customers weren't thrilled; they were happy. Enough of our customers were happy with our experience. Some people were
Yeah.
super excited, but they were more philosophically excited about the power that what technology could do, versus like the people that
Almost
were
like the
skeptical.
promise
Yes,
of
yes,
Lev rather than what they were seeing
yes,
today. Right.
exactly.
Interesting. Yeah.
So versus today, which we'll get to, but like our customers look at our product and they use it and they just like are drooling and they're like,
Right.
this is literally what I want
So
for my life.
was there like a particular moment that you had a conversation with a customer where you realized where that pit sort of started to grow? Where you're like, oh, like this is like nice, but not
The,
what we
the
need.
the difficulty I had was like all of our numbers were good. Our business was growing.
But
Like
you just felt it.
we
You
were
knew it.
raising a shit ton of we were raising insane amounts of venture capital.
Right. You raised
Investors
like
were excited.
70 million in a round. Like
Yes,
I don't remember
yes,
exactly. Sometime in
yes.
2021. Right.
Exactly. 2020.
Yeah.
April 22. We raised 30 every year. We raised 10, 30, and 70 every year.
Yep.
And it was just like, and investors were excited, and our board was excited, and everyone was excited, and our team was excited, and I was excited. I was
Yeah.
excited, like we were doing something exciting, but like, but there was a lot of, and the vision that I had developed at that time was like, all of the stakeholders that are working on these transactions need to unify in one platform, and that was the premise. That vision was developing in like the first year and a half, and I have not moved from that vision since day one. At the same time, the brokers in we when we were running this business, other brokers we would talk to would be like, why don't you license this software to brokers, license your software to brokers? And I'm just like, no, you don't get it. Like we're gonna build, we don't need a broker anymore. We're gonna build the place where everyone collaborates.
Owned and
the,
operated. Yeah.
exactly, and all the official stakeholders are going to be on one software.
By the way, I
And
wonder if there's some subconscious reaction to what happened with Dispatch here, where with Dispatch, you couldn't ever figure out how to build that consumer-facing market, that front-facing marketplace, and you were reliant. Your pitch was, we're going to have the enterprise customers sort of give us their scheduling availability, and then we'll rely on them to help build the marketplace. And then at the end of the day, after you gave them the functionality, they're like, no, actually, we don't want to make our stuff available. And now you're like, no, I need to own the market. I need to own the market. I wonder if
100%.
there's some
It wasn't
parallel
subconscious. It
there.
was actually very conscious. I was very
Oh, okay.
consciously
So
saying to
conscious.
people, like, I don't want to get into the same thing that we got stuck in at Dispatch.
Right.
And
Right.
I was talking about that constantly. 100%. Yes,
Right.
that's a very good point. And my so in the situation was like everything outside looked amazing, fundraising, business growth, revenue, etc. Even unit economics were like getting there. There was a path that you could believe. In my heart of hearts, like I didn't quite feel like we had enough control of the business's core. I didn't quite feel like we were making the progress of being technology. I didn't quite feel like we were building something that like every customer was mind blown of. And I was very much like, we're going to get there. And then
Yeah.
in the thing that I started spending a bunch of okay, so that was the sort of landscape, but it was fine because we were growing our way past that. We were growing so quickly that I wasn't even worried. Like we were going to get to the scale that we needed to, and it was going to be great. And we were still pushing on technology a lot, and like, and the lending product was innovative, and we were starting several lending products. There was definitely a path there. And everyone was supportive. Then interest rates, when we raised our Series B, which was $70 million in equity for the business, and $100 million line of credit for our lending business. So we were like rocking and rolling. It was insane.
Yep.
And then literally like within 2 or 3 weeks, interest rates went up and venture capital froze and real estate just really froze. Real estate froze solid.
Yep.
Zero transactions. So like our whole pipeline went from like insane, we were on track to do $2 billion or something, to like zero. Lending business, I was just like, what the f do we know about lending? Like we just
Also,
don't
like,
know.
what are you lending against if there's no transactions?
Yeah, that, but also like we don't know enough about lending to lend when no bank on earth is lending right
Right.
now, and like we decided that we can put our
Right. In
money
a
where.
world where everyone's lending, you can sort of get away with it.
Right,
But
and
like
also we
when
were making
you don't want
money
to
in
be
our
the
lending
schmuck
business.
holding the
Yes,
paper at the end of the
100%.
day. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And we were very close to that. And I had read enough, like, I had read enough doomsday stories from the dot-com bubble and other bubbles that I was not down to be a part of it. So
Right.
very quickly we shut down the lending businesses, which was like crazy because we'd put millions of dollars, like millions and millions of dollars, which was just
Yeah.
insane. And then we sort of looked at the business and we're like, okay, we had like a bunch of exec meetings and we're like, what do we want to do? Our
Wait,
premise.
before you get to the point of like what are we going to do? Must have been a moment where you guys were like, okay, this is not like a 2 week inflation. Like this is here
Yeah,
for a
yeah.
while.
There's no volume. There's no volume
Yeah.
for a while. We should assume that there's no volume for a while. We should assume that everything we had bet on for the lending business to like increase our margins and get us more wallet share, etc., is not going to happen.
Yeah.
So
But
what do
not
we
just
have?
that, your transaction business is also dead.
Is
I'm
exactly,
using
exactly.
right.
It's exactly right. So
So,
what
so,
do we
but
have?
so all of this. So, how long was it from like when interest rates started rising till you realized, guys, we need a major change?
3 months, 3 or 4 months, 3 or 4 months where we were like just trying to squeeze out whatever we could.
Was it squeeze out? Was it just like delaying the decision? Was it hoping things would turn around quickly, or was it inertia? Like what?
All of it. All of it. Like,
All of it.
how could we be so wrong? A lot of it was
Right.
just like, this isn't real. Like we were in denial. We
Wow.
had just got an office to go from 120 people or something to 300 people. We got like literally 300 people desks worth of office space. Like
Wow.
we were rocking and rolling. Like I thought
Right.
there was no stopping us.
Wow.
And we basically had unlimited. We raised our Series B when we still had most of our Series A still in the bank. Like it was just crazy. So so we decided. So we were having a bunch of these
What?
conversations
Sorry.
before, like, yeah.
What's the vibe during this 3 month period? What's the vibe at the company? Could you tell what morale was like? Were people? Did you think people were feeling your stress? Like what?
This is not really this the issue. One significant thing that was coinciding with this was just the general distraction in startups from building a startup, which was happening. This was like peak of that right before the bubble burst. Like we were just like so focused on other things as a company culture that we weren't thinking about the business. So like I was like worrying about like random other things that I shouldn't have been thinking about, and that was very stressful to me, more so than the business. Like I was like
Hmm.
almost more worried about those random like DEI things and like keeping people excited about like random things and like culture. This was like when you couldn't hire an engineer for no matter what kind of thing. So we were like, yeah, I was kind of like I think a lot of companies and us included were just distracted with like the wrong things rather than figuring out the business. So like I was getting complaints like, hey, we haven't done like a you know marshmallow outing
Marshmallow
in like
roast, right?
three
Yeah.
weeks. Yeah, in like 3 weeks. Like let's do that. Like
By the
no,
way,
we're just
that's
saying like, well, what
interesting.
about our revenue?
Right, was but that's interesting because it kind of shows like what life was like pre the startup chill or whatever you want, to VC chill or funding
100%.
chill or whatever you want to
It's the
call it,
best thing that ever
versus
happened to the
post,
whole ecosystem.
which is like why are you guys worried about the marshmallow chill? You haven't closed the deal in 3 weeks. What are you talking about the marshmallow
Yes,
roast?
exactly. Exactly. Yes, that's exactly right. And we spent we so but and then they were like we had an exec team which was like too many people and I had like we had hired we there was a lot this just goes back to like you don't know what you're doing and you get distracted. Like things were going so well for the business and then people are like you need like a head of people and you need like this thing and that thing and that thing and that thing. And I was trying to be like the CEO of $1 billion organization versus like figuring out the core problems that we had right now, which I learned the hard way through just like getting beaten up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But also by the way, like not to like give you an off ramp, but like or an what's it called, like a way out. But essentially,
Excuse.
like
Yeah.
you thought you were going to 300 something people. Like you had just got a new office, right? Like when you are
100%.
growing that fast, you do
And
need to
everyone
institute
told me I
like
was right. No one,
right, right,
the board, no, the board, etc. Like no one knew that this. No one knew that this was all
right,
going to be really
right.
bad. No one knew
Right.
quite how
And
bad
at
it was
that
going to
point,
be.
everyone was like, grow, 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 no matter the cost.
100%. Every single meeting, every single conversation I ever had with board, etc., was like grow, 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 and like by any means, and hire more and hire more. And yeah, that was, yeah.
Okay, so now you're at what? Now you're, I don't remember when inflation started. So what month of
So
2022 are we in now?
we raised our round in April 22. I felt like $1 million. We were rocking and rolling. We were like,
Felt like
and
70
then
million
like
plus 100 million in debt.
April, yeah, exactly. So like set, and then in like summer things got bad, and then like September we're just like, holy moly, like what are we gonna do? So then we
Yeah.
started having like a bunch of really intense offsite meetings with the exec team of just like, what do we want to do? And the company was feeling like, well, what are we going to do? We're way off on all our
God,
numbers.
so at that point, people realize that, not
Yes,
just the
yes,
executive,
it was
people
starting to
realize it.
happen.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And then early November 22, we had an exec offsite, and the outcome of that exec offsite was we're trying to build this like software solution to bring together borrowers and lenders for their deals. We're trying to do it with this roundabout tech-enabled brokerage way. The roundabout tech-enabled brokerage way is dependent on volume increasing so that you could build the marketplace. That is not happening. Let's just try to do it directly. So
Right.
we
It's
said
almost like
at that
your
period,
your individual ability to get volume has massively diminished, and so we need to find volume a different way. So let's spread it across everyone, and that collective volume hopefully will get us what we want.
no, it was more like let's just
No,
focus
okay,
on
great. Tell
building
me more.
the software. Let's just focus on
Yeah,
building the software for people to do it themselves as if we were
not even
like
the
starting
volume.
from scratch.
Volume doesn't
Yes, it
matter.
wasn't volume related. Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Yeah,
So
we built a great set of tools, and we have more to
yes.
build. Let's now
Yes,
get
but
people
we
who
said
want
let's
to
be
pay us for
self-serve
that.
software instead of being exactly. Let's make our software self-serve. That was the premise. We called it self-serve. Like let's make
Yeah.
the software self-serve for our customers to run their own financing and just sell them the software instead of us running it. So we will have a salesperson, give them software, they can run as many deals as they want, or
Right.
we no longer are human dependent on running individual transactions.
Yep.
So we decided let's keep the brokerage business going as much as we can while we do this. We
Yep.
decided can't either way. We have too many people. We were like 130 people or something. Either way, we can't figure this out with this many people. Let's cut down to 80. We'll have like 20-ish people doing the new thing. We'll have the remaining team trying to run the current business. We executed the layoffs and doubled down on that strategy in the last week of November or something. I think it was right after Thanksgiving or right before or something. We gave people crazy severance. We had crazy money in the bank. We like did our best. It was literally people we hired like 2 weeks before. It was just, it
Right.
was
It
really fucked
feels
up.
the
Yeah,
worst.
yeah, it was really bad. And it was probably one of the worst days. It was the second worst day of my life until the second round of layoffs, which was literally the
Mm.
worst day of my career by far. So we, we we pursued that. We said by January 1st we're going to launch our MVP, or January 15th we're going to launch the MVP of self-serve. We
Wow.
rallied towards it. Like this was like it was a big org, and like in a big org, it was a big org that was built with like in peak time. So like I'm not as close with all the people. It's not like you know what I mean. Like the startup, the there's a certain, this is my hot take. There's a certain like a startup up until 40, 50 people is a cult, and the success of it is 100% dependent on people believing in the CEO as the cult leader of like I you and this is like for sure true, and anyone that doesn't believe this is just out of their mind of how a startup works. Like in a startup there's so much stuff that's not believed, that's not known, that if you don't say like I trust Yaakov Zar and Yaakov Zar has my back and he knows even though he doesn't know what he's doing, like he knows enough of what he's doing right now, that you're like committed to doing that. If you're not aligned like that in a startup at that's like pre A, or like let's say series A, like it's really really hard because then everything just becomes second guessing, etc.
Yep.
And a lot of what we were doing was trying to get away from that. Like it's not about Yaakov, it's about the business, because at a certain scale like you need to do that too, but we didn't really have that figured out. So like there was just a lot of personnel dynamics and people, etc., and like trying to please everybody, etc., and politicking to get people on board. And like we ended up launching the MVP. We had enough traction, which I don't even believe why, but like we believed in it enough. And the other business was just not happening. And we just could not sustain the other business not happening or figure out the new business with 80 people. It was still too much. And we're like, great, let's go to 30 people. So we did another round of
Why? Can I
layoffs.
ask why?
Yeah.
Why didn't you just go to 30? I know it's easy, like Monday morning quarterbacking. But why not go to 30 in the beginning? Like, what did
That was
you
one of the
think
worst
that you needed
decisions
to
I made.
offboard? Okay,
I should have gone to.
tell
We
me
thought
more.
that we could sustain. I'll tell you why. We thought that we could sustain the revenue. We thought that we would go from our run rate was like almost $10 million. Let's say we thought that we could be at like five or like four or something
With the original
with the
business.
small team. Yes, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Which is like really kind of good, right? Like I mean that's a very you don't want to go to zero if you don't have to. It ended up that we were basically at zero anyway. So it was stupid.
So
So
you
like
just had unrealistic assumptions about what you could salvage from the original
yes,
business.
I should have known that we weren't. I should have known that first. It's very hard. You just raised $70 million, and then you're like, "Hey guys, we're gonna have zero revenue for a while we figure out this entire business from scratch." So like, yeah,
Wow. How long after that? So January 15th you
it's
launched, and how
3 months.
long
April
would
April something. We did
and
the
you're just
round
like, oh
ups.
god, bad decision. It's time to just like
Yeah,
make this
100%.
tough one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that was really hard, and that took. Frankly, it took like another. It took all of 2023 and some of 24 of just like getting the culture back because like it was the hardest round of layoffs. These are like close friends, people that bet on me and joined the company from me, even the first round, but the second round especially because it's like even your better people, right? And
Yeah.
then and then some of the people that are left over like don't really believe in it, but like they stayed and like so there was just a whole lot of like getting out of that, and then the I know that we're like way
No,
probably on
no.
time up on time.
I'm okay. Or
Yeah,
if you're okay, then there's a couple more minutes.
I
But
have like 5 more
um,
minutes. Yeah.
okay, give me quickly in what were you telling your investors during all this? Like this is a long
Yeah.
period from when a lot of things happening. Are they like clearly? I know Animal clearly was like awesome, but like based on what you said earlier, but like
Look,
were people pissed?
it's
Were
a it's a
people
tough position for
understanding?
investors to be in. It's a tough position for investors to be in because like on the one hand, they don't have as much information as you do as a CEO. This is your investors are we have I would say we have some of the best investors in the industry, both of real estate industry and venture industry. I'm very, very happy and proud, and I respect them tremendously. And they bet on us early, and they've had my back always. They have a very limited perspective on the business. They're not here every day, so they only know what we
Yeah,
tell them. You tell them what you want to tell them and what you have to tell them, et cetera, et cetera.
it's
And
asymmetric
like
information. Yeah,
100%. And if and as smart as they are, like they can't their knowledge and experience also is limited. So like you are if you're hoping that your investors are like you know you're reading into the Bible and they're giving you answers, it's just not real. I don't know how it
no, yeah,
works on a
I'm
typical
more
scale,
curious.
but
I
it's
totally agree by the
no,
by the way.
my
When I
investors
told my
were
this,
my
yeah.
investors had my back. My investors had my back. They said they were skeptical. They were surprised. They were surprised and skeptical.
Appropriately skeptical, probably.
Appropriately skeptical, absolutely, and they were still encouraging us to there was a line that was repeated to me often, like you're not gonna shrink your way to growth, the better wording, but like you have to
Yeah.
you have to grow at some point, like you're not gonna shrink your way to success or something, because I was just like doing layoffs and like figuring it out, but I knew that we didn't have a business that we believed in,
Right.
and
And
but
also,
I
you were
also knew
shrinking the team working on the legacy business that wasn't working, whilst maintaining
yes.
the core team on the new
Yeah.
product.
Yes, and like it's kind of hard to explain to them all the nuance of why we had to what the old business was and the new business is. Like it's. I mean, they understood it for sure, but like there's a lot of nuances on like why our go to market is different, et cetera, et cetera. So they were just like taking the information I was giving them, but like every board meeting was like miserable. It was like
Yeah,
we had
yeah,
told you this number and we're like at 10% of it or something. Like it was just it
right.
was miserable. And they trusted me for a while. They gave me enough rope to figure it out. And I mean, today I think they could not be happier. I mean, they probably could be happier, but they're very, very, very happy in terms of where we are as a business. Like beyond, probably more happy than they've ever been.
When you look back, so now I assume you've built now the product that you pivoted to, which is like you're selling this piece of
Yes.
software to other agent to not agents to
Both to
brokerages.
sponsors directly and to brokers. We're
Okay, to both.
the premise I had was always like everyone needs to collaborate on the software. Part of my
Yeah,
thinking was like as that happens, the broker is not going to be necessary anymore. So why enable it? That's not true. The broker will always be necessary on many kinds of transactions. So our software needs to support them as a stakeholder, which is what we do now, and it's been amazing.
By the way, I feel like it's a classic like startup hubris. I don't think you'll be offended if I say that. Like, I can cut out the people,
100%.
right? And,
A
and you're
million
like
percent.
actually, like physically living in the world, not just from a philosophical sense, but also from like a practical sense. People want to they want to get a $5 million loan where there's a person telling them it's going to be okay.
100%. 100%. 100%.
Right. Wow. Okay. And so you come back, you build this product, and now it sounds like you guys are off to the races. I'm probably a lot of lessons learned, but like in a much better place.
Solved. Problem solved. Yeah.
For those who couldn't see that, Yaakov snapped his fingers in an awkward kind of way, but
it took yeah, I mean, it's a huge personal and physical and psychological toll, but like we got it through. And I think like, look, by the way, the hard thing back in these conversations that I think is like, I'm sure you have a lot of entrepreneurs that come to you for advice, etc. Sometimes I just want to be like, dude, yes, it's about grit and grind and you got to stick through, etc. Sometimes you got to pack up and go home. No
yeah.
one, like, you don't, people have told me to pack up and go home, and I'm sure people have told you to pack up and go home, and I've told myself to pack up and go home, and I should have maybe at some of those times, but like, there are times where you should, and I didn't, and it turned out right. I think
Yep.
retrospectively, like, I was right that I didn't, but that's also
Yep.
hard to tell. Like, maybe I should have. And
Yep.
I think that that's just like an important point. Like, I think the only point that I've gotten to is like, in your heart of hearts what the information is, and you need to be in this stage of company. You have to be more reliant on the CEO and founders like gut. I think that there is a stage where that goes away. I think that assuming the CEO and founder is capable, which I still don't know, but I'm trying, like, you have to depend on it. That's the only thing that will make a startup
The only thing you can
work.
latch onto. Everything
It's
else
the
doesn't
only
make
thing you
sense.
have.
You're trying to do this crazy
Exactly.
thing that no one's done before, and if you don't believe in the person leading it, then you're just not gonna. You won't be able to like get up every day and be like, oh, I got to do the
There's
work.
too much, and
to
if you don't believe in yourself in this, and like know that there is, yes, you're making a bet, but like you're smart and you're capable, and you have as much information as anyone else will have, and you're gonna like put your all into figuring it out as the CEO. You're the only person that's going to be able to make that decision. Otherwise, no one else is ever going to make that decision. By the way, I could have ran that business burning. I think we were burning like $3-4 million a month. I could have ran that, and no one would have forced me to do anything for quite a while. And we, yeah,
Amazing.
we
Wow.
through all
Okay,
that
Yaakov.
stuff,
On that note, what a conversation. Wow. But for everyone, I didn't know most of what we just talked about, even though I've known Yaakov for now, 7 years. That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing it all. I'm excited
Thank
to
you.
hear what people think about it too. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next time on The Hard Pivot.